History picks. Sorry I'm a little late tonight. Just got done with baseball practice. Shout out to my Cheesequake Cadets baseball bros. Nice practice tonight, gentlemen. July 9th, 1755. In a battle attempted to claim the French fort of Fort Duquesne, British General Edward Braddock suffers a fatal injury. That's July 9th, 1755. The reason General Edward Braddock was trying to claim Fort Duquesne from the French is because the French and the British were involved in a war back in Europe, a war that will be known historically as the 7 Years' War, even though it actually lasted 9 years. But fact, 7 Years' War actually lasted 9 years. The reason why they didn't change the name is because they had already printed the t-shirts. You know, I lost my arm in the 7 Years' War and all I got was a stupid t-shirt. So I decided to keep it the same name. That is not a fact, I made that up. But, so British and French are fighting in a war over in Europe, and so King George II, not the one that you're thinking of, King George II decides, as long as I'm fighting the French here in Europe, I might as well try to claim some of their territory over in the colonies, over in North America. And so King George II had his eyes specifically on this region known as the Ohio Country, which, coincidentally, is exactly where Idaho is today. No, it's where Ohio is today. Anyway, so King George II tells his colonial leaders here in North America, go get the Ohio Country from the French. And so the colonial leaders appoint a young major from the Virginia militia to lead a colonial force against the French at Fort Duquesne. Fort Duquesne, which sits, or used to sit on the site of where the city of Pittsburgh is today, was kind of the last French outpost before the Ohio Country. So the idea is you take out Fort Duquesne and then the Ohio Country is open for the taking. And this young major from Virginia, you may know him as as George Washington. George Washington leads colonial forces against the French at Fort Duquesne. And most people aren't aware that Major George Washington led colonial forces against the French at Fort Duquesne, because Major George Washington gets his ass kicked by the French. The colonial forces are utterly destroyed by the French defenders. So that is why, my friends, the British say, all right, let's send some actual British troops with an actual British general, Edward Braddock, and he'll take care of business. Edward Braddock gets killed trying to take Fort Duquesne. George Washington survives, and according to, if you go on the Mount Vernon website, Mount Vernon being the Washington home where George and Martha enjoyed a fine life, owned many slaves. I'm not shrugging like owning slaves is good. I'm just shrugging because, you know, that's often another element of George Washington's story that's unreported. But anyway, this is from the Mount Vernon website. In the wake of General Edward Braddock's defeat, like something like 900 British soldiers are killed, including their commander, right? And according to the Mount Vernon website, it says, despite Britain's monumental losses, Washington valiantly evacuated the remaining British forces and was the only surviving officer. Valiantly evacuated the remaining British forces. That's called running away. Valiantly evacuate. Come on, guys, let's run. Let's valiantly evacuate. There's no shame in that. Like, you know, you got your ass kicked. Time to get out of here, right? Live to fight another day. But valiantly evacuate? Anyway. So Edward Braddock's defeat and eventual death now changes the nature of the fighting in the colonies, and what was initially supposed to be just like this quick strike to take out Fort Duquesne and then the British would seize the Ohio country now turns into another war. So you have the 7 Years' War still going on in Europe, and now the conflict that'll be known as the French and Indian War breaks out in the colonies, right? Which the British will eventually win, and Fort Duquesne will be retaken by the British, and the British will go on to lay claim to most of France's North American colonies. So in spite of George Washington's defeat, in spite of Edward Braddock's death, the British do prevail. But your lesson for today in terms of, you know, trying to fix, right, our perceptions of history, because that's kind of what we're doing here, right? Right? It's okay, like it's important that we learn from, right, defeats. It's important that we learn from mistakes. Again, we had baseball practice today. Guys are going up and missing the ball, not getting hits, that kind of stuff. So you say, all right, what did I do wrong? And you get better, right? And so my problem with American history is oftentimes we want to erase or kind of valiantly evacuate it. You guys fucking ran away. Sorry. It's okay. Like, listen, Washington ran away because his troops got destroyed, and he lived to fight another day. He probably learned some lessons as well, that when you're fighting the French, and more specifically when you're fighting the French and their Native American counterparts, you're going to have to deal with guerrilla tactics and that kind of thing, ambushes, surprise attacks, that kind of stuff. And as we know, those of us familiar with the Revolutionary War, some of Washington's forces will eventually use those same tactics against the British. So Washington learned his lesson. It's okay to say, hey, you got his ass kicked. He did not valiantly evacuate. He ran away, and that's sometimes just fine, right? History is rarely pretty, right? But that's okay, because that's how we learn from it, right? So stop polishing the trophies, stop, right, attempting to make everything nice and rosy, because we know life's not nice and rosy. And so just like we learn from life's mistakes, we learn from the errors and misadventures from history too. All right. Was that a positive thing? I mean, basically some dude died, but at least everyone got t-shirts. History fix. See you tomorrow.